If you were in the real estate space, you would be thinking about what does your real estate business look like in 3 years? What are your relationships with the bank like? How would you describe those? What are your relationships with investors like? How do you work with investors? What are your relationships with the subcontractors and the trades like that you're using to maybe do renovations or flips? If you're running rental properties, how are you dealing with the tenants? How are you dealing with the neighbors? So it's just describing the things that you're going to have to be figuring out without necessarily having all the answers for them right now.
All right. Welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Investors Podcast. Today, we're honored to have Cameron Herold with us. He's known as the CEO Whisperer, and he's the founder of the COO Alliance and host of the Second in Command podcast. He's written books like Double Double and Vivid Vision, and he's taken 1-800-GOT-JUNK from, I think it was like 2 million to like 100 million in like 6 years. And he's going to be sharing his expertise in leadership, operations, and creating a vivid vision. So we're really happy to have him here with the Real Estate Investors Group. So Cameron, thank you so much for coming on. How are you today?
Good, Julian. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Awesome, Cameron. So let's get into it because you've been an entrepreneur from a young age. From what I've known, you were groomed to be an entrepreneur. So if you were, can you share some kind of key experiences from your early days when you first approached business and leadership? Like, how was that like,
Yeah, I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. My father ran his own business. Both sets of grandparents ran companies, and they raised my brother, my sister, and myself to all be entrepreneurs. So we've all been running our own companies for between, 17 and 25 years. I was an entrepreneur when I was only 20 years old. I had 12 employees in my first company. And my dad really started to show us at a very early age, first off, the benefits of being an entrepreneur, which was never about money. It was about having the free time to do whatever you wanted, wherever you wanted. And then secondly, he always tried to show us the skills that you needed to become more entrepreneurial and to kind of leverage that, the mindset and the opportunities that we would spot. So from a very young age, he was trying to teach us the different skills that we'd need to be successful.
That's amazing. I've heard in some previous podcast appearances that you've had, you say that entrepreneurs are basically in business for 3 reasons. You said is 1 to get cash, or 2 to get freedom, or 3 to say you did something. Can you talk to us about that? And is that something you grew up with and apply today?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was sitting with a group of entrepreneurs the other day, and one of them even said that he still feels like he's trying to have that feeling of accomplishment because the school system had told him for so long that he wasn't going to be successful. If he would only try harder and be like everybody else, that he might be successful. And he's always felt like he has to keep trying to prove that he's a success. So there is that feeling, that kind of intrinsic feeling that entrepreneurs have, that feeling of accomplishment, right? We're driving towards our why or having our core purpose or to be able to be seen from others as being successful. There's like that intrinsic need that often entrepreneurs tend to have. And then secondly, clearly around the money, right? Everybody's like on social media talking about here I am with my Lambo, or here I am working from this great location, or here I am with this whatever. But the money isn't entirely it either. That's only one part of the puzzle. And then third, it's that ability to have the freedom, right? To be able to do what you want, work the hours that you want, not get stuck working that 9-to-5 job or working for the man. And those tend to be really the only 3 feelings that people have got. Maybe there's another one, which is just this burning need because they see a problem and they need to fix the problem. But it's really usually tied to one of those first 3 reasons.
That's incredible. In your early journey, which one was the one that was driving you towards making all this, business success?
For sure, it was the feeling of accomplishment. It was doing something. The desire to make money was there because I had to pay for my own way through university. So there was definitely a desire to do something that I could, but I got involved in it at such a young age that, I already had the free time because I was already a kid. So I wasn't trying to get free time. And in fact, I was probably giving up the free time, but it was definitely the feeling of accomplishment. And then once I got the business up and running, I definitely started to recognize that I could actually have more time during the day to do my activities and have fun, be able to control my working hours more. So I definitely got a good sense of that. And then the money certainly started to follow.
Nice. That's great to hear. So you've been, very instrumental in some companies growing to hundreds of millions of dollars. For a beginner in real estate, what mindset is essential for achieving growth in this kind of, industry?
Well, I think one is certainly understanding of the numbers and the economics. I think most businesses fail because the entrepreneur doesn't understand the basic economic model, right? They don't understand supply and demand. They don't understand price elasticity. They don't understand the basic P&L, right? With revenue minus cost of goods sold minus, overhead is your net profit. And they tend to just kind of miss on a lot of those components. They don't understand gross margin. They don't understand pricing for optimization. So they really fall in love with their idea. They fall in love with their product. But if they don't understand the economics of business and the math of the business, they're just going to be doomed to fail, right? Even when I came into 1-800-GOT-JUNK, in the earliest couple of weeks that I was there, I raised the prices by 40% because there was no way that anybody was going to be making any money. Brian, the CEO, wasn't, the company wasn't, the franchisees weren't, the guys out in the trucks weren't, because we just simply weren't charging enough to have enough margin to be able to pay everybody. So I think that's one of the key things that people need to think about getting into the real estate business, is really understanding all of the mathematics and the economics of it, right? And there's people out there that you can follow. I think they get enamored with the whole, oh, I bought a place for this and I sold it for that. Cool. But the gross margin that's left has to pay for your accounting and your legal and your, marketing and your sales and the operations and all the hiccups that happen. And it has to pay for your lifestyle along the way. And they often don't think about that. They don't think about the cash flows. So that would be number one. Number two, I think the mindset that you need is that you have to be able to overcome failure, right? You have to be able to be resilient and be tenacious. And I see a lot of people that have been hyper successful for long periods of time. When they hit a brick wall, when they hit failure, that frustration becomes so paramount for them that they don't realize that there is no box, right? You can go around the problem. You can go around the problem the other way. You can go over the problem. You can go under the problem. But when you hit a problem, you need to be more resilient and tenacious. And that was something we really looked for in building the house painting industry, was people that had failed, had overcome failure, and understood how to overcome failure. And that's something that really isn't talked about. I think it's a real shame on social media that we've glamorized entrepreneurship, where we're trying to get everybody to be entrepreneurs, whereas only a small subset of people have that mindset and the skill set to actually be successful. And then I guess third, it would be probably the ability to lead, right? Really, really being a strong leader, to be able to lead yourself, to be able to lead others, to be able to lead the banker, to be able to lead, you're really leading people and selling people every step of the day.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, those three things are very important. Besides those things, like, what are some of the biggest pitfalls that you see entrepreneurs face? And, how can a real estate investor that's just beginning to start their own, business, how can they kind of see those ahead of time and make it so that they don't have to go through that as some others have?
Yeah, there's a couple. One is, I guess, a sense of community, and one is the sense of belief that entrepreneurship is really easy. If you just work hard, you're going to be successful and you'll have all the money. People forget that it takes a long time to get to the night before you become the overnight success story, right? It can take years and months of really hard work and a lot of focus and putting your time and energy and money into a problem. And if they're not resilient, they might tend to give up. So I think that's important to remember. It takes time, right? And part of that, again, is understanding the mathematics of it, but really applying yourself and not getting super frustrated. Secondly is having a sense of community. I think it's important for anybody getting into the real estate space, getting into any business, that they have some kind of a sense of community around some other entrepreneurs, whether they get involved in an online coaching program or a mastermind community, or they get involved in going to conferences where people are in the same industry as them, so they can be around people that are going through the similar issues and they can learn from others. So a little bit of that R&D stands for rip off and duplicate, right? Take the best things that other people are doing and do those, because most people don't have a large network of entrepreneurial friends, right? Most people have friends that are doctors and lawyers and teachers and dentists and chiropractors, and they work in auto body. They have normal jobs. So it's really hard to draw on the expertise of your normal social network. So I'd say those two things: plugging yourself into a strong entrepreneurial social network, and then also making sure that you work on that resilience.
Gotcha. I think the second part is very important, although the first one is also important too. But I noticed that, people that have, let's say, access, everybody has access to people nowadays on social media. You can, find a person on Instagram and DM them. You can, find the person's email address and email them. A lot of people do have access to these people. A lot of people don't have just don't have it in them to reach out and ask for help or to try to create that community for themselves. How do you, actually apply that R&D of like rip off and duplicate? Like, how do you actually come up to someone and be like, hey, I really want to build something like you, and I would like to kind of rip off and duplicate what you did, and have them actually go out and help you, in a way that actually makes sense for them, and for everybody involved.
Well, one is remembering that everybody who's out there has been helped by someone else, right? So people that have been very successful in their business were probably helped by someone else 10 years ago, 20 years ago, or 30 years ago. So it's kind of in us as humans to be able to try and help and support others. The second part is just to remember that if you can ask for a very specific help, exactly what you're looking for, exactly what the outputs you're looking for tend to be, and you can ask it in such a structured way, you're probably going to get a response back that is very favorable versus just, can you help me? Can you mentor me? Like, the answer is going to be no, it's too wide open. It hasn't been thought through. So thinking very specifically of where you want help, what that other person can help you with, and making sure that you're reaching out in a small container of time, and then just being, referable by saying thank you and saying please, and, showing the work that you've learned and what you've done with that later. I think if you're reaching back out to someone multiple times, it's by showing them that you're taking the work that or the ideas that you're getting from them and putting them in place. That usually makes it more apt for people to try to give a little bit more help later.
That's very interesting. Yeah. So yeah, that's totally true. If someone comes out and you help them, and then they come back to you saying, oh, this is how I applied it, and this is how it made a difference in my life, the person that helped now feels like that's the reward that they got. They actually, the person actually went out and did something with it. So that's really cool. And so I really want to.
Well, the other part is remembering that it is also about putting yourself in the right room.
Yeah.
Right. You can attend conferences, you can attend masterminds that are for people in the real estate industry. So go to those events, spend the time and the money and to invest in yourself and to invest in your connections. By going to those events, you're increasing your skill set, you're increasing your confidence, and you're increasing your connections. And it's really those three things that you're going to leverage off of to be successful.
Gotcha. Connections, confidence, and skill, right? Yeah. Interesting. That's wonderful. Yeah, that's wonderful advice. I think that people should get around the people that are like them and that are further ahead than them. So I think that's very valuable advice. I want to touch on something that you did on, in 100 Got Junk. Yeah.
Well, and Julian, I want to kind of underscore the reason I keep referring back to, these connections and community, and it's because entrepreneurship is much harder than people believe it is coming into the space. If you're coming into the space of being a real estate investor, everybody just somehow feels like you're just going to go buy a couple properties, you're going to make all this money, you're going to be a millionaire and drive a Lamborghini. It's not going to happen. Like, it's harder to raise the money. It's harder to find the property. It's harder to deal with the litigation, harder to deal with the laws. It's harder to deal with licensing. It's harder to deal with the subcontractors. It's harder to find products that are priced affordably enough for you to make the margin that you've got. And it's hard to spread that margin over enough time to be able to have a lifestyle. And I think what happens is with the absence of that sense of community, you can get all the mentoring that you want, you can get all the advice that you want, but you need people to lean on who are going to say it's okay. You're going to be okay, or they can give you some of those shortcuts. And I think in many ways, social media has been very dangerous for people because it's trying to kind of overhype entrepreneurship, and it's trying to make it more glamorous than it can often really be.
Yeah. So I think it's the saying that goes like, it takes a village to raise somebody, right? So yeah. I understand what you're saying. How does someone, I guess people that are trying to get into this space, how do you make connections with people? Like what is it like? I guess people usually have like a take mentality, whenever they get into a room of people, maybe they're looking to get something from them. And yeah, they can be very specific and actually get an answer. But I mean, if it's mainly like you're taking from, the other person, what kind of relationship can you build off on to actually have it be in a different way where you're, adding value to them, or it can just be a lasting relationship where, the person doesn't feel like, oh, this is a bother, or, I actually want to be.
Yeah. Until someone has actually got or garnered the expertise for themselves, I wouldn't necessarily focus on what you can do for the other person in that early stage. And I'll explain why. You probably don't have enough specific skills or experience to add value. And what ends up happening, because you try to add value, you kind of end up diminishing yourself. It's like, thanks for the help, but I'm way past that. I have people probably on a daily basis. Here's a video I edited for you. Hope you like it. Can we get on a call? It's like, no, didn't need a video. I have 2 video editors. Thanks for the help. Don't need it. I rewrote your landing page. Like, you don't know enough about my needs and my goals and my business to rewrite my landing page. So I think people are trying to do things too early in the relationship to gain reciprocity. I think what you want to do is be curious. Just be there and ask the person about themselves. Ask the person about their business. Ask the person about, the trials and tribulations they had in growing their company. And I think if you can show up and be curious and wanting to learn about them and learn about their story and learn about their successes and learn about their failures, you're going to get them talking to you. And if the person starts talking to you, they're going to generally start to like you. Then once they actually like you, then you can ask for very, very small nuggets of specific advice based on maybe what you've heard, and just say thank you. That's all you need to do. I think by trying to show up too early in the relationship and trying to help, like if you go to a conference and you meet a real estate investor that owns 1,000 doors, there's probably not much you can do to help them with right now. And to try too early to help them until you understand all of the issues, maybe one of the things that they're doing is struggling with some relationship they have with one of their kids. Maybe that's what you can help them with. But it's by being curious and getting to know them and their lives and their business before you try to go in on the help stage when you're smaller.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. That's very contrarian to what other people say. And I think it's very common sense.
Well, and there's a trend right now around trying to offer something to gain reciprocity, but it's too early in the relationship to do it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I want to touch on, you did double. You wrote about how you can double your revenue and double your profit every year. I wonder if that in some ways, the frameworks, if that applies to real estate, if those tactics can apply to real estate.
Yeah, so I talked about doubling your revenue and doubling your profit, and it was 3 years or less. And it comes down to, staying very focused, right? Staying in your swim lanes, making sure that you understand the basics of business, caring about people, caring about culture. So I think it definitely would, right? You have to be able to have a vision for what your real estate business looks like in 3 years, what you're driving out towards, and then starting to reverse engineer that, thinking a little bit bigger. That way you can ask for help, right? Thinking a little bit bigger. That way you might be able to look for investors. Thinking a little bit bigger, which maybe will scare you into learning more. A lot of people tend to start something and try to make it bigger. What I usually start to do is lean out into the future and reverse engineer that, right? Bring that future state back today. Yeah. And by doing that, that tends to accelerate growth. So if you were going to start in real estate, start by thinking about how many units you want to own in 3 years and bringing it back to today. And that'll start helping you figure out the plan. That plan will then show you what you need to get better at, what you need to learn about, who you need to learn from.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's something that I want to talk about, because a vivid vision is a huge thing, that I've been implementing in my business. I actually have the book right here. And what you mentioned is, you got to have an end in mind and reverse engineer it. And I think the Vivid Vision book is exactly what that does, is that it puts you in this exercise where, you want to reverse engineer what it looks like, feels like, and how your business acts like in 3 years. Is that right? So
it is, yeah.
So what is that, and how can it be done, in application to real estate?
Yeah, so if you were in the real estate space, you would be thinking about, what does your real estate business look like in 3 years? What are your relationships with the bank like? How would you describe those? What are your relationships with investors like? How do you work with investors? What are your relationships with the subcontractors and the trades like that you're using to maybe do renovations or flips? If you're running rental properties, how are you dealing with the tenants? How are you dealing with the neighbors? So it's just describing the things that you're going to have to be figuring out without necessarily having all the answers for them right now, right? So from the industry, the real estate part of the business you're running, you can describe all of those things. You can describe the day-to-day. You can describe cash flow. You can describe the types of units that you're buying and where you're looking and why you're making those decisions. So those things that tend to happen in our mind now become a much clearer picture that help us figure out the framework for how to make it come true.
That's amazing. Yeah. I think you did some kind of study on this where I think you got this from like, it was called a painted picture or something, or it was from a study where, you had like athletes and who you envisioned themselves, at the very end of at performing that kind of, sport that they were doing. And then you had them like that. There's some study behind it that actually creates some neural pathways in your body that actually get you to exercise and actually live that moment, so that when the moment actually comes, it feels like, and you actually act better. Can you tell us more about that? Because I know there's deeper than that,
Yeah. So this is 25 years ago. We met with an Olympic coach, and he was a high performance sports psychologist who worked with athletes to help them visualize themselves in the actual moment of their performance. And he got to the point that they could play the camera or play the video of themselves in the actual moment, whether they're throwing the football or hitting the tennis ball or doing the gymnastics routine or skiing the race course, whatever it was. They could see it so clearly. They could visualize themselves kicking the ball and where it was going into the net. It was such a crystal clear vision that when they performed the actual part of their sport, it was almost like they were completely on instinct, because it becomes so instinctual. There's a principle in adult learning where you go from the unconscious incompetent, like that you don't know something, to the conscious incompetent, right? That you know that you don't know something, to the conscious competence, which means that you know something, to the unconscious competence, which means you don't even have to think about it. You just know it so intuitively. Like when you and I go for a walk, it's very easy for us to go for a walk. It's just part of us now. That's kind of what the vivid vision does, is it shows the entrepreneur and the employees and the shareholders and the stakeholders and the customers what the business looks like in such vivid detail that it just becomes instinctual for them to start making decisions on how to make that come true. And that's how the athletes use it, is they can see themselves performing so that it becomes almost like an instinctual act. So we took that concept and brought it into the business world, and that's the phrase that I then coined as the vivid vision.
Nice. That's incredible. It's such a great study and such a great application to business. So when who should create the vivid vision? Is it the entrepreneur? Who should he have help with in creating it? Is it and who's gonna read it? Is this supposed to be a public facing thing, or is it just like company focused? Like, who is it? Was it that's gonna read this and all that?
Yeah. So the vivid vision should be written by the entrepreneur, right? You don't want to get the vision from all of the employees, because then it gets very watered down and it doesn't become that complete driving force. In fact, when Steve Jobs created the iPhone 17 years ago, it was his vision of having something that would be such an insanely great product, it would challenge the status quo and change the human race. But if all of his employees were helping, we would have had a keyboard across the bottom, because all smartphones had keyboards back in the day. So he decided to go against convention. But if he'd taken the advice of everyone else in his company, it would have been a very watered down product with a keyboard. It wouldn't necessarily have turned out to what it is today. That's really the starting point. The people you share it with are everyone. You share it with your family, you share it with your investors, with your advisors, with your banker, with your lawyers, with your accountant. You share your vivid vision with employees, with potential employees, with the media. So everybody can see what the owner can see. It's kind of like when Elon Musk is talking about colonizing Mars. That's an aligning statement that would be part of a much greater vision that he's sharing with anybody who will listen, so that we are all inspired and aligned with, oh, okay, this is about Mars. It's not about the moon, right? It's not about the space station. This is about Mars. That's a very big aligning objective of his vivid vision.
Yeah, that's amazing. And How should someone write a vivid vision? Like, should they write it at home, like, at their office, or should they go out and take a trip? And, like, where's the best place to get it done, and how should be your headspace in order to, oh, look at that.
Go to a place like that to write your vivid vision. You go to a lake or to a park or to up in the mountains, go to a cabin, go to some beautiful high-end resort and sit out on their property somewhere and just allow your mind to dream. You don't want to work on your vivid vision from inside of your office. You don't want to sit with your laptop and do it, because you get very stuck in the problems and in the planning, and you end up going down all these rabbit holes. It's first about kind of allowing your mind to just drift and be relaxed. So if you can go into a place where you can just allow your mind to drift, and you take a notebook, you can start writing down all the ideas into a notebook. That free-flowing kind of just active, just letting it yourself breathe and be is going to where the ideas are going to come from. And then you can take that vivid vision after you craft that 4 or 5 page description of your company. You can take that back to your office, and then you can start figuring out the plans to make every sentence come true. Right? It's at that stage that you can figure out the who, what, when, where, why, and how of each part of your vivid vision.
Okay, that's amazing. All right, love it. That's incredible. So I want to talk a little bit about your COO Alliance and the Second in Command podcast. So I know that everybody glamorizes CEOs, right? And you're obviously working with the Second in Command, which I believe are the COOs, right? So I want to talk a little bit about what kind of role is that, and how would that be applied into real estate, like who.
It's probably too early to even talk about how that true second in command, the COO, will play into the real estate sector. So I'll give you a segue that I think will be more impactful for everybody who's listening. There's a core group of skills that anyone who manages people needs to be really good at. And that includes a real estate investor who's going to be managing subtrades and employees and bankers and partners. So those skills, I actually outlined each of the 12 skills. If you go to investinyourleaders.com, so it's investinyourleaders.com, it's an online course where I codified 12 core skills that anyone who's managing people needs to be really good at. I think the real estate investor, needs to focus on those skills and learning those 12 skills and adopting those 12 skills and using those 12 skills on a day-to-day basis in running their company. And then after you get to the kind of the 20 employee, 25, 30 employee zone, you're going to be truly hiring that COO role. So that's really a role that's best reserved and best talked about when businesses are a little bit bigger.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That's when it's a little bit bigger. How should or who should be the person that
I even had a woman reach out to me yesterday, and she said that a friend of hers company doing $2.5 million in revenue wanted to hire a COO, and they would be willing to pay about $120,000 a year. I'm like, first off, a company at $2 million can't afford a COO. You're probably at best getting a vice president or a director level. And secondly, $120,000 to $150,000 is certainly not a COO. It's probably a director of operations role, or maybe a very early stage VP role. And then when I looked at the roles and responsibilities, they were actually looking more for a director of operations or possibly even executive assistant. So people are trying to use these big titles for no reason, right? Like, you could say, oh, I really need to have, a spouse. It's like, no, you really need someone to help out around the house 2 days a week, right? Or you really need to have, I need to have a landscaper. It's like, no, I need a person to cut my grass, right? So be careful with putting titles. I think is where I'm going with this, is anybody who's getting into the real estate space, be very careful with putting titles on top of things. What you do need is skills. You need the skills of situational leadership. You need the skills of delegation, of time management, project management, all skills that I cover in my Invest in Your Leaders course. Those are things you actually need. And then later, you can start hiring people to do things that you need. And those things that you need, you might be able to put titles on them.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. So yeah, I'm sure there's a pretty big danger with having to, hire someone and giving them too much of a title, But for a real estate investor who's starting out, who should they prioritize hiring first? Like, who are those?
It's probably going to be either an executive assistant to get a bunch of stuff off your plate that is sucking up your time, or maybe it's going to be a project manager or a person, again, it's hard to say what the title is when I don't know what the roles and responsibilities are. Like, so is the person starting out in the real estate space, are they doing renovations? Well, then maybe it's finding a contractor. Is it marketing of a property? Then maybe it's a marketing freelancer. So it's hard to say what a title is that someone should hire. A title should be tied to the roles and responsibilities, the metrics that they're accountable to hit, the level of autonomy that they have, the amount of P&L responsibility that they've got, and the amount of money you're willing to pay. So it's hard to say what somebody should hire when, we're not super clear on those things. Gotcha. You definitely, in the earlier stages of building a company, want to hire people that are kind of the jack of all trades, master of none, right? They're good at getting a bunch of stuff done, but they're probably not a deep domain expertise somewhere. Domain expertise tends to cost a lot more, and you probably don't need that in the early days when you got somebody doing a lot of things.
Gotcha. Okay. So do you have any resources on that topic where, like, how can someone really, like, understand what roles they're hiring for and understand what type of person they should hire for, especially at an early age stage in the company?
I've done a bunch of videos that are on my YouTube channel. If people go to my Cameron Herold YouTube channel, there's definitely a bunch of videos on titles and roles and hiring. The interviewing section talks about how to interview people that you're hiring already. There is a small section in my book, Double Double, but yeah, I'm not really sure where to point people on that one. My domain expertise tends to be when companies are already running, the 25 to 250 employees. So that's not usually a question that I'm asked to have built resources for.
Yeah, totally understand. I noticed that you have a hiring method that is very different than most, where you actually have the person who is, getting hired, go out and chase you. Do you have some kind of, can you share on that topic?
Yep. Yeah. So I call it reverse engineering or reverse selling. And in the interview process, the more that an entrepreneur tries to convince someone that this is a great job, the more that those good employees get chased away, right? It's kind of like you're coming on too keen, you're coming on too eager. And I guess in the dating world, it would be called playing hard to get, right? If you're too keen, you're too eager, then you're going to push that person away from you. So in the interviewing world, it's the same thing. The company needs to make sure the person fits. The company needs to make sure that the person really wants the role. The company needs to make sure that the person has read the vivid vision and is excited about the future. And the company needs to get that person to sell the company on why they're a perfect fit. And that, if you ask the right questions and get the candidate selling themselves, they will want the role more than if I sell them on all the benefits of the company.
That's amazing. So you actually have the person apply, read your vivid vision, and then reach out to you in regards to that, how they can make it come true, right?
Yeah. So before I even read a resume, I hit an auto reply back to them and I say, thanks very much for submitting your resume. Please read this vivid vision of what our company looks like, acts like, and feels like 3 years in the future. Please read this recent article of us in the media, and then reply back with a 1 to 2 minute video of how you think you can help us make our vivid vision come true. If we like your video, we'll bring you in for a group interview. So then I take the people that I got video submissions from and I interview them over a video against each other so I can kind of get a good read on who culturally I vibrate best with. And then I'll go into the very in-depth, skills interview to make sure that they have the skills to do what's on their scorecard, to make sure they've done it before. And I'll do some stuff around behavioral tests then.
Okay, that's amazing. What kind of method do you use when you're doing group, interviews? Like, you have all the candidates?
Yeah, so it's either over Zoom or in person, and you bring in 6 to 8 candidates at the same time. And I'll be asking all 6 to 8 candidates roughly the same questions. So, what do you do for fun? Everybody answers. What's the most stressful time in your life? Everybody answers. What are your favorite books? And I'm just getting a good read on the room. I'm watching the energy. I'm watching the way people react and think and how they'll respond to each other. I'll ask about managing stress and biggest projects they've ever handled. And it's just, again, to see how they handle frustration, see how they position themselves, see whether they complain. Like, you're just getting a read on them. And then based on that read, then I'll bring in, maybe if there's 6 people on the Zoom or 6 people on the Zoom in-person meeting, I'll bring back 2 of those 6 and I'll do very in-depth interviews with those people. But it allows me to see some better candidates faster, not waste my time with candidates that I know 5 minutes in are not going to be the right fit. And then it also allows the process to kind of work versus me having to sell the company.
That's incredible. I love that. I love that hiring method. I haven't heard of it before. So I want to talk about a little bit about how you build a world-class company culture, and how can someone that's starting a real estate investment firm, whatever it may be that they're doing, can kind of align it, in the beginning so that it can get there, eventually in the future once it's built up.
Yeah. So the first is that every single person that you bring into your company has to be excited and kind of inspired by the vivid vision of the company. If people are excited and inspired by that vivid vision, culture starts there. You're hiring people that already live the core values of your organization. That's just the normal for them, right? They asked the founder of Southwest Airlines, how do you get all your employees to be so happy? He said, we hire happy people. So instead of trying to get the average person to be happier, if you hire really happy people, they show up happy, and that stirs good energy. Yeah. So you're always looking to bring good energy people into the organization because that energy creates more energy. And you're looking to be very careful that you don't bring in negative energy into the organization, even though the skills are there.
Gotcha. And okay, that makes sense, because is it a situation where like one bad apple can ruin the bunch? Is that?
Exactly right. So the grandma was always right. The one bad apple rules the whole bunch. It's like a cancerous tumor. If the doctor told you had a cancerous tumor in your body, how long would you leave it there? You'd be trying to get that cancerous tumor out right away. It's the same thing in your organization. If you have an underperformer or a person who culturally doesn't fit, get those people out of the company really quickly and bring the right people in, bring the good performers in. That's why in the early stages, you want to hire good energy people that can do lots of things versus the expert, right? The expert isn't necessarily going to bring everything that you could be bringing to the table.
Gotcha. Yeah. So when it comes to culture, you want to have someone that looks at the vivid vision and is excited about it. Is that it? Or is there a separate kind of document or a separate kind of procedure that you do for building a culture?
Yeah, culture is in alignment with vivid vision, with core values, with the company's core purpose. It's making sure, again, that you have the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and everybody in the right seats, like Jim Collins said in Good to Great. It's about making sure that people are aligned and that they have the skills and the coaching and the capacity and the connections to do the jobs that are in front of them. It's making sure that leadership is there to support people and align people and grow people versus manage them and hold them accountable. So culture kind of comes off of those things. What we often read in the media about culture is that it's about the massages or the free lunch. Those are merely perks, right? That's not culture. That's stuff that you're giving people that hopefully are already ideally aligned with the culture of the organization or aligned with the core values.
Nice. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so there's a little bit more moving pieces for culture to work and make sense. That's incredible. So let me ask you a little bit more on a topic which you authored a book on, which is free PR. And I just want to know from you, how can a real estate investor, use media, in order to get attention, to build more, to get more opportunities, to attract employees and to build their brand, and why is that important?
Yeah, I learned this back in the early days when I was scaling College Pro painters. And at College Pro, we didn't have a lot of money because we were university students that were painting homes. And what we had was the ability to talk to the local media, the newspapers and the magazines and the radio stations and TV stations about the fact that we were students running our own business and giving other students jobs. And we were taught in a way that if we spoke to the media about what we were doing and the benefit to their reader or listener or viewer, that they would cover us. And sure enough, they did. So I learned in a very early stage that the media is always looking for content. And if you can help them, if you can be good content for their audience, their listener, their viewers, they'll cover you. But if you show up saying, hey, can you talk about my whatever? Can you talk about my course? Or can you have me on your podcast to talk about my coaching? No, that's not really relevant. But can you have me on your podcast so I can talk about growing people and growing culture and growing leaders and about vision? It's absolutely, because that's a big help for your audience. So that was what we learned and how to apply it. And then ever since, for the last 30 years, I've been leveraging free PR to grow all my companies. In fact, I even wrote a book called Free PR that anybody in real estate can read. And it's around just leveraging that local audience and then taking the content you get and sharing that with your banker, taking the story that you were covered on, sharing that with your customers, right? So often you won't get a lot of marketing or sales from the press that you're getting, but it's what you do with the press that you're getting that'll help you generate, a lot of potential revenue or a lot of potential deals.
That makes sense. Okay.
Even sharing the press coverage that you're getting with a potential employee, that employee would rather work for you than work for a company that doesn't seem to be as successful because they're not getting press.
Gotcha. So let's dive in a little bit deeper on that. What kind of coverage should you be getting? Like, if you were to, publicly advertise some things about your company, what are some of the things that you would want other people to know that would make it so that if they were picking between a company to work for and another one, that you would be the one that wins,
Yeah. So, the things that the media will write about that are going to help you with sales are the fact that you're an organization that lives core values, right? So if the media is writing about how you show up with integrity, how you care about people, how you're an employer of choice, how you are, doing lots with charity, the spin-off benefit of that to a customer is, wow, this is a company I can trust. This is a company I would put my money with. This is a company I would believe in. So if you can get the media to write about that, that's important. If you can get the media to talk about, awards that you've won in your industry and that you're a thought leader, that you are, a contributor, you're doing stuff in your industry trade associations, that you're winning awards as an entrepreneur, those are things that will build credibility. So it's really getting the coverage about that's truly going to help you. Another one is just getting stories about how your business has helped your customers already, right? Can you get the media to talk about that? So then you have additional customers that think, wow, I'd like them to help me.
That's amazing. Cool. Yeah, that's very valuable. That's very valuable, especially in today's world with social media. There's so much that you can do in order to get your voice heard, so I think that is very valuable.
Well, and that's where I think the people that are on social media that are sharing ideas and sharing systems and sharing our thought process around things and how we make decisions around core values and core purpose, those are the videos that tend to do well, or the ideas that tend to get shared. I think if you're just on social media saying, buy my product, buy my product, buy my product, you're not going to be as successful. It's not going to have the same kind of connection with your potential customers.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It usually comes down to the core things from a business that actually people want to hear, that drive the business, towards a higher success.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about operations, because you've said that you're very good at operations. It's one of your core strengths, and so I want to talk about how you played a significant role in 1-800-GOT-JUNK, from an operational standpoint, to grow this business and see how that applies to real estate, and how someone could use operational efficiency and scaling and all that to get to a better.
Yeah, it's actually ended up being a lot of the systems that I shared in my Invest in Your Leaders course. It takes people 6 hours to go through that course, completely self-guided. And those are the systems that I used and that then I trained all the managers and senior franchisees at 1-800-GOT-JUNK in to actually scale the organization. So some examples would be systems on, managing projects, managing multiple projects, complex that had, different resources like, tools or people or money, and how you were managing those across an organization or managing them by yourself. That was number one. Managing time, right? People actually have only got the same number of hours in a day, and the ability to actually manage time on priorities. So my time management skills are all based on something called priority management. So priority management then leading into time management is something that's going to really help an individual in real estate. one around delegation, another one around coaching, another one around situational leadership. Those 3 skills together are how you lead other people. It's how you coach other people and develop other people. So I tried to think about all those skills that I needed to be successful. I put them right into that Invest in Your Leaders course. If I was getting into real estate, I would just devour all that content, right? And then think about how are you going to use that to be a more effective and more efficient, more productive leader, a leader even of yourself at this stage.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds very important. All of those things that you touched on are very important. Time management, delegation, all of those things are really important. So definitely I urge people to check out the Invest in Your Leaders course. And I want to talk a little bit about, just how to grow fast. Like, a lot of the books that you authored, the Vivid Vision, Double, it's kind of in a 3-year time frame, right? I believe that you have coined that 3-year time frame as one of the best time frames in order to get something done. I believe you said a year is too short, but 5 years is too long. 3 years is just a perfect time in order to get something done. So when you actually have your vivid vision,
well, not so much to get. It's not so much to get something done. It was first tied around the vivid vision concept that if you're going to craft a vision for your company that's, a 4 or 5 page written description of your company, leaning out too far, it's too far out there that it's too big, it's too crazy, it's so far away that it doesn't even matter yet. So there's no urgency. If it's only 1 year out, it probably looks pretty similar to what you have today. So there's not enough excitement and energy. 3 years feels about the right time to reverse engineer a company. And then, so that was really the starting point of the 3 years. I also don't put plans in place for the 3-year vivid vision. I have a vision for the company in 3 years. I have a very rough plan for 2 years and 1 year. And then for 1 year, I have a very more detailed plan and then a full project plan for, 1 quarter at a time. Gotcha. I think so often people are thinking about the big plan, without even getting the basics going first. And you can often spend a lot of time and money and kind of cycles on things that aren't really that relevant right now. And we only have 3 resources, right? We only have people, time, and money. So if you're putting your time into the wrong things, that's just going to delay the growth of your organization, the growth of your business.
That makes sense. Okay. So can you talk a little bit more about that? You said that you have a vivid vision, and then you create a rough plan for 2 years, and then you create a more detailed plan for a year, and then you kind of break it down. When you're breaking this down into, smaller components, what kind of things do you have to keep in mind in order to get a good plan that you think that would actually drive the needle in your business?
One is that the things that you're putting on your plan, so the things that you're going to have to do you have the skills to do them? Do you have the confidence to do them? Do you have the time and the money to be able to do them? And then are they aligned and are they the best things, right? Because again, you might have the skills to paint or the skills to hang cabinets and the money and all that, but right now you got to pour the foundation. So even thinking about your skills and capacity and connections to do stuff that is so far out isn't necessarily that relevant. So, but that would be the starting point, is looking at your plan and then asking yourself, do you have the skills and the confidence and the connections and the money to do that stuff? And then if you don't, where can you get it? Right? If you do, how do you do it with the least amount of pain in the ass, the least amount of effort? Because you want to work smart, not hard, right? It's like the fly trying to get out the window. Could work hard all day long, but they're going to end up dead on the windowsill. If they would step back and look around, they could just go out the window. Then they're finding that path of least resistance.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. All right. So definitely that's something to take into account. So, I think you're coaching a lot of people now, right? And I just want you to, talk to the audience and tell them, like, if you're looking to get into this, a business in general, like, what kind of things should you be looking out to do, and what things shouldn't you do,
That's so broad. I mean, it's so broad, right? I think I would read some of the books that are meant for early stage entrepreneurs. I would take courses and working on yourself and your skills so that you're going to be more productive as an entrepreneur. And I would start crafting some kind of a vision for what your business would be looking like. I would start with those 3 areas, right? If you get more and more clarity around what your business looks like, what you want to be building that 3 years out, you can start reverse engineering that. But what skills should somebody need? It rarely varies. I would go back to those though.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So can you share with us, your top 3 personal habits that you have in your business or practices that you had that, have attributed to your success?
One is probably around mindset, that kind of positive, driven, tenacity mindset, like that never give up mindset. Another habit would certainly be around productivity and the ability to actually work on the right stuff and in the least amount of effort and time. That perfection doesn't necessarily move that needle forward. And I guess the third would be that I really leverage my ADD, that I see everything that's happening with, the customer and the supplier and the market and the economy and my metrics and the website. And because I've learned how to leverage what other people think is a disorder, I see it as a strength that I can see it all. Is then the ability to organize it, right? Using the tools that are in my Invest in Your Leaders course, organizing it using project management and time management and delegation and coaching of others, that I can tend to get a lot done. But I think those are probably my biggest 3 success habits.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really good. Do you have a favorite book or podcast that you kind of intake besides your own?
I guess the 2 that I'm listening to now for podcasts, one is My First Million with Sam Parr and Sean Purry. And the second would be the All In podcast. Just find that the kind of topics and discussions that those guys have are just interesting, intriguing. But I'm also thinking about and approaching learning at a different stage, right? I'm at a different stage of my career. I'm at a different stage of learning and listening. I think if I was following any business thought leaders, I would be following Dan Martell and his YouTube content. I think he really covers the entire gamut of entrepreneurship better than anyone in the world. A lot of the YouTube people or Instagram thought leaders tend to be just sales and marketing and funnels. Yeah. Dan's Martell covers a lot, so I like his content.
Nice. Okay. I want to touch on a little bit about the TED Talk that you did. And
I have a hard stop. I also have a hard stop in 1 minute.
You do? Okay, all right. Well, let's wrap it up.
Yeah, because we had this book.
All right, so Cameron Herold. So for the listeners that are listening right now, where can they find you? What action should they take to connect with you?
Yeah, the probably the easiest starting point would be my website. If you go to CameronHerolds.com, that has all of my books, the links to the course, links to my speaking events, links to my YouTube channels. And then I would also check out my Cameron Herold YouTube channel. I think that would be really super valuable content. Once your business is up and you're running and you've got things starting to go, definitely take a look at the Second in Command podcast on anywhere that you listen to Apple Pod or podcasts today.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Cameron. Really appreciate having you. And we look forward to having you on in the future. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks, Julian. Appreciate it.